This is the Future Talent Podcast, a future-focused podcast series showing the channels that enterprise can engage today to empower their current employees and future-proof the talent pipeline of tomorrow. This series is brought to you by Technological University Dublin's Enterprise Academy. We create learning solutions to enable your business success. Want to find out how we can support your learning and development needs? Visit www.tudublin.ie/enterprise-academy to book in a call with our team.
Welcome to the second series of the Future Talent Podcast. In this episode, our expert panelists explore the evolving landscape of AI, discussing its impact on learning, industry, and the essential skills required for the future. Our panel features a diverse group of thought leaders. First, Dr. Dimpna O'Sullivan, academic lead at the Digital Futures Research Hub, TU Dublin. With a PhD in AI, Dimpna provides insights into the current and future demands for AI-related skills, emphasising the importance of technical proficiency and business process re-engineering. Anne Masterson, head of the HRM discipline within the School of Management at TU Dublin, Anne discusses the necessity of humanising our skill sets, focusing on critical thinking, problem solving, and the integration of soft skills with technological literacy. Next, Dr. Kesiena Ebenada, Capability and Learning Development Lead at BT Sourced. Kesiena shares her experiences in bridging the critical skills gap in a global organisation, highlighting the importance of continuous learning and personalised learning pathways. And finally, Peter Blennerhassett, CEO and co-founder of Blinksolve. Peter offers a perspective from the pharmaceutical industry, addressing the cautious approach towards AI implementation and the potential for AI to revolutionise drug discovery and manufacturing. This panel was moderated by myself, Dr. Dee Duffy, Senior Engagement Manager with TU Dublin's Enterprise Academy. Join us as we navigate the complexities of AI and education, providing valuable insights and practical advice for future-proofing your career in an AI-driven world. Whether you're an educator, industry professional, or lifelong learner, this episode offers gems of knowledge to help you stay ahead in the rapidly evolving landscape of AI.
Okay, so we have a room full of people here to get all the answers. Do we know what the question is? I feel like sometimes we're all here trying to, what is this? What is next? What are you doing? What am I doing? We're all trying to understand AI a little bit more. And today on our panel, we're going to talk a little bit about the what and the how we learn, because I think we're all scrambling to learn, and yet we're like, well, are we learning the right thing? What are we supposed to be learning? What are we supposed to be doing? What are the skills? There's all these kind of questions. So we have a wonderful panel today. I could say experts, but I think when we say expert with AI, it's like, I'm not sure if I know everything, but we're explorers anyway. We're explorers in this kind of domains of our we've got university representatives and industry. But I thought before we head into the future, I'm going to just take a little step into the past for a moment. And just when we were talking today, sometimes I think, lest we forget, I'll share a kind of story about how we learned circa 2001. So if you can recall, around the dot-com era. So I myself was a student, and I was in a research project. Obviously, we were doing our dissertation, and I just shared this because I think it's important to think about how far we've come in terms of this gathering of research and data. And I remember the day my father brought home a Dell PC and unboxed it in the house. And this was, this sounds so archaic to some people sitting here, and to others, they're smiling and nodding along, going, yes. So even to have one in the home, so this was like a wonderful moment. I was like, yes, I was heading into final year. I'm going to be able to do my dissertation. Click dial up. It's like, Dad, there's no internet here. I can't do anything on this. He's like, I'm not buying that. We've got the computer, but I don't have the internet. So how I gathered data in 2001, I had to catch a bus. So I took my bus fare, get onto a bus, physically come into the university space, make my way to the library. There was Chinese whispers that there was some such thing as a library database. I didn't know about that. I went one by one through the journals to take out physical documents, look through, hope that I'd find some journals that would have information that I needed. And if I hit the jackpot, I would then make sure I had enough money on my photocopying card to go and photocopy the physical journal, to print it out, and to read it with my own eyes, and to take notes on paper and put together my thesis. That now sounds archaic from somebody who could do this in their bedroom with their remote library data bases. And it's just interesting to think about those skill sets that we were acquiring through that process and that we might lose into the future. But also just to think about now, how that feels. Now there's a piece of technology that I can press and go, it will export. If I give it the right, feed it the right kind of constructed prompt, a thesis better than I could write myself, and it can do it instantaneously. So then we're left with, so now what? What for learners, for academics, for industry, if we can just export out this data and information that we once took lots of pride in creating, what are the skill sets needed now as we head into this environment? And that's what hopefully we're going to have a little chat about today. So to start us off then, we might, when I introduce, I'll let each speaker introduce themselves as they have a question, because you can find out more about them on our website behind me. But a brief introduction, and then maybe we'll start with Dimpna and maybe to just ask that question: what are the skills that are needed now in this AI environment?
Sure. So the introduction plus. Thanks Dee, and thanks Claire for inviting us here to speak today on the panel. My name is Dimpna O'Sullivan, and I'm the academic lead of the Digital Futures Research Hub at TU Dublin, which is an interdisciplinary research centre which has computer science and AI very much at the core of it. We see that as a sort of, I suppose, the vertical pillar within the research hub, but we have all of the sort of horizontal pillars across the domains, the life sciences, the social sciences, and so on. So my own background is in computer science, and I have a PhD in artificial intelligence as well, but I definitely still don't know all the answers. So I suppose in terms of, what are the in-demand skills, we might, I think, maybe just back up a little bit and sort of think about, how is AI impacting work today? What do we sort of see the impacts of it on jobs right now? And I think there's two things really. One is we see a lot more sort of task automation happening in the workplace. We're not really, that's where I suppose a specific task as part of a workflow is being automated. We don't really see full roles being automated yet. I think we're starting, to see these smaller specific parts. So if you think maybe something like in a manufacturing plant and you're doing some kind of, visual quality inspection or assessment, you can see how a computer vision tool can do this quite easily now, right? It can, look and find the parts that are, perfectly formed or those that are deformed, and it can, pick those out. It's more difficult to use AI across that entire sort of task workflow, let's say. You might have to have something like a robotic arm going in and picking things out. So we're just seeing a lot of this kind of partial task automation. I think the other thing we're seeing a lot of as well is the sort of, with generative AI, much more task support. And this is much more, I think, being used by sort of knowledge workers, the use of generative AI tools to support people. And we see sort of the research is showing lots of stuff from, increases in productivity, things around from anything from code development to marketing campaigns and those kind of things. So I suppose with that kind of backdrop, thinking about skills, I think the other thing is we're sort of at what I would call the sort of jagged technological frontier. We're not quite sure where this is going to land when it comes into the workplace. It's not really clear yet what tasks are really going to benefit from AI support and actually what tasks might actually reduce in quality from AI support. So we're sort of at that frontier, and I think people are trying to figure out where this is all going to land. So I suppose in terms of skills that'll be required, definitely there's huge demand for skills, technical skills around AI, machine learning, data science, data analytics, all of those kind of tasks. If you're thinking about, a sort of a more data-driven environment that people are going to work in. And we see, the talent pipelines there are slim, and companies are really kind of crying out for sort of people in those kind of spaces. I think given that we're looking at this kind of task automation or partial task automation, skills around sort of business process re-engineering are going to be really, really important. We're going to have to figure out how humans and AI are going to work together to solve tasks. So trying to understand those workflows and think, how we can kind of reorganize, business processes along those lines. Another thing, obviously, data is at the heart of all this. So people who are specialists in data privacy, probably data ethics kind of specialists as well. We see with the regulation, the EU AI Act and so on, we're certainly going to, if you think about GDPR, it brought in something like a DPO, a data protection officer. The EU AI Act may bring in people like AI officers and those kind of people that will come into your companies. Just generally, technological literacy, AI literacy. If you're not an AI specialist, you're still going to more than likely have to use AI now to do part of your job. And I think it's really clear that people using AI will outperform and be more creative than people not using AI in roles. So people just have to become more and more AI literate. And then I think finally, just those kind of transversal skills, particularly around sort of learning agility, being able to adapt and adjust, because things are going to be coming at people pretty thick and fast over the next few years.
Okay. And actually, that might be a good point to bring in Anne then. So Anne, if you'd like to introduce yourself then, and maybe to talk a bit more to that idea of that integration of the tech with soft skills.
Hugely. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Anne Masterson, and I'm head of the HRM discipline within the School of Management, People and Organisations here in TU Dublin. And I'm delighted to be here and listen to the techie guys, if we can call them that. And I'm here as a human and to talk about human intelligence. And largely speaking, I suppose, and you mentioned some industries where it's hitting hard. Obviously, the use of artificial intelligence in healthcare and logistics and within HRM itself. But talking about the skill set specifically, Dee, that you're referring to, I think it's really important that us as humans further humanize ourselves. So we need to make ourselves more human. And when I talk about being more human, it's something that artificial intelligence can't replicate. So if I'm looking at kind of the top 5 skills that people would need, it's away from the techie bit, would be certainly the old kind of adage of communication and teamwork, but in a different way, because also say leaders and non-technical specialists, we need to learn the language of technology, and technologists need to learn the language of business. So that interaction and being able to work on teams in terms of jargon, and in terms of our own use of language, so that we can understand each other, that we're not siloed anymore. Collaboration and teamwork is always there. Okay, so actually working as one with the one focus that we need. So you're always kind of seeing those. You mentioned kind of the fact that we need to be open to lifelong learning. We need to be adaptable. We need to be flexible. AI is moving like that, and we as humans again have to bring ourselves to be open to that and be open to the learning. So there's a lot about us as collaborators, as communicators, as conflict handlers that AI can't do. Big thing that we need to be capable of doing is being critical, our critical skills and our problem solving skills. We can't believe everything that it actually spits out at the moment. And I'm involved in a number of different exercises with students around their thesis. Funny enough that you mentioned that, Dee, where we have had incidents where we are questioning the authenticity of theses being presented to us, and we're kind of grappling with that in terms of, geez, how do we know the difference, and how are we actually going to assess for that in the future? But essentially, the skill piece is make ourselves more human, make ourselves more adaptable, flexible, open, and non-copyable, if you want to put it that way.
Okay, thank you, Anne. And so then just to pick up then from what Anne is saying about, we're grappling within university spaces of how to use AI and introducing it, but maybe Cassiana, can you first of all introduce what you do, where you work, and maybe talk to what's happening in the kind of professional space in terms of introducing AI?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Cassiana Ibenade, and I work with British Telecommunications Source. So we are owned by BT, but we are a standalone procurement company, and I lead in the capability and learning and development space globally. So we are about 301 employees globally. And yes, coming back to your question, I think from a practice perspective, yes, we have recently partnered with the Enterprise Academy to be able to develop some critical skills gap in our people. And what I did in the business last year was to go to the business and try to understand where the critical skills gap lies across the organization. So we try to pull this skills gap together to form a combo program, which is the Certificate in Applied Procurement Management program. And we have the first cohort of 25 people currently on the course. It's a 12 weeks course at the moment, and I think they have just a few weeks to go. And I think what we have found is looking at our strategic goal, the business goal, is to become a digital AI company. And how do we become that digital AI company? So our CPO, who is very big on AI, is actually ensuring we've got a lot of AI tools currently in the organization. How do we support our people to utilize these AI tools? Because the tools are there to help our people simplify, innovate, and also digitize the procurement processes. But we're finding that people are having challenges using these tools. So for me, in my role is how do we support our people to be able to use these AI tools? So what we're doing is, as part of the TUD program we've just recently developed, emerging technologies is one of the topics there in that module, in the program. So we're also supporting our people, equipping them with AI skills to be able to do their job effectively. And we're also looking at, we just introduced what we call AI series. So this is where we have a suite of in-house programs, and we have, our people have been developed through our learning experience platform, which we've branded internally as My Campus, but the platform is owned by Degrade. So within that platform, we have learning pathways. So we're trying to create personalized learning pathways for our people, ensuring that these pathways could look like data analytics and also artificial intelligence. And we also have different reports, different learning resources, also links to LinkedIn Learning as well. So those are some of the areas where we're leveraging on. Yeah.
Cassiana, you mentioned kind of how BT sourced are working with the Enterprise Academy, and something we really, promote is that university enterprise engagement. So maybe Peter, I might come to you. Peter, maybe you can give us an elevator pitch of what your company, your startup is doing, and maybe speak to how you act as an enterprise faculty, as we would call it, to kind of help bridge that gap, bring industry into university campuses to help students to learn.
Sure. So delighted to be here and hear all of these very pertinent ideas about AI and how it's actually going to fit into the future of work and also learning. So my name is Peter Blinner-Hassett. I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called Blinksolve, which you almost definitely haven't heard of. We're based here in Dublin. And I'll say before it's almost an apology. We don't work with AI, which is generally one of the first questions we get when we're talking to VCs, because there's a lot of focus of how to get AI and pumping money into all these various companies, but unfortunately we're not using it at the moment. So what do we do? So we work with pharmaceutical manufacturers to simplify their manufacturing, essentially. So it's a digital knowledge twin that enables design, collaboration, and knowledge management. I was, before doing that, I was actually a process engineer in Pfizer and MSD, and through built up frustration of how inefficient that is and the lack of clarity in the industry, did the very normal thing and started up a software company to try and help it. So yeah, it's an industry that, and Paula touched on it in the last panel. They don't have a huge appetite for risk. So the idea of AI, and I'll speak to this in a bit, of usage within that, it needs to be incredibly focused, and the risk around controlling the boundaries definitely is right up at the top of the list. So in terms of how we work with the likes of TUD, and thank you for Adrienne for the invite here today. It was almost incidental that while we were working with companies with this design and collaboration tool, a lot of people were saying, this is great for learning and development. Have you spoken to universities about this? And we went and we showed demos, and it was like, oh, this would be a great way of sort of engaging students, showing in very simple terms what these very often very complicated systems look like in a more visual and intuitive way. So I think it was about 6 months ago, we actually were out in the Tala campus with a room full of, I think it was 50 students. They were all, given free rein with the actual software to build their own processes. So it was great to sort of engage them to say, okay, this is what we're trying to do. How do we do that? And it was a tool to sort of build that up, because in the industry, it's traditionally very document heavy. When everyone joins a group or an organization in pharma, generally it's like a phone book of SOPs is the traditional way. So we're trying to help in terms of keeping it nice and simple and visual, so people can get up to speed faster and potentially have flexibility to move around, which obviously has applications within university to engage students.
Okay, Peter, thank you for that brief introduction. I know it can go in depth, what you're doing, but you did really well to keep it an elevator pitch. And maybe you touched a little bit there about the pharma industry being kind of risk averse as such. So I might just ask Dimpna maybe to pick up on that in terms of ethical considerations in terms of AI.
Sure, yeah, and in terms of, I suppose, AI in the workplace and so on. So I suppose what we're seeing as coming out as being the sort of top ethical issues when it comes to AI, the big one, I suppose people are thinking about job displacement. So, increasing automation of roles and of tasks, and, are there sort of ethical concerns about workers being replaced? I think there's a kind of a question there around, will there be equity in terms of the roles that will be replaced? Will it be sort of the so-called more lower skilled people who will replace, or more kind of junior workers? So, and I think that goes back very much to kind of Anne-Marie, what you were saying there, is that we sort of, we really need to start reframing about how AI is a, potential collaborator with humans. We kind of need to think about AI as not a replacement for human workers, but more of a sort of a force multiplier, for workers. We're going to see more of humans and AI working together. So, we obviously have to think about how we design that. When it comes to AI ethics, I mean, bias and discrimination is always one of the issues that's there. What we see is, I suppose, AI increasingly being used in the management of people, kind of algorithmic management of people. And I suppose there's two different types of AI algorithmic management. One is traditionally, I think, very much in the kind of HR space. We see AI being used more and more to sort of, to find candidates for jobs, to filter CVs. We also see it now in the workplace being used, for example, to calculate promotions, even terminations and things like that. So I suppose the important thing in those systems is that these algorithms aren't biased towards any sort of demographic group, because these AI systems can perpetuate or exacerbate biases if they're trained on biased data sets. So, that could result, for example, in a person not being shortlisted for a role if they're kind of an outlier in the data set. And we've seen some kind of very high-profile cases of that, in the news and so on. I think there's generally a kind of an issue around, AI transparency and accountability. So if AI is making these workplace decisions, it mightn't be clear to workers how these decisions are being made, right? They're not being made by a human, and it's difficult for them to sort of understand how decisions are being made. So that hinders transparency, and obviously that can create a kind of a trust issue, I think, between employees and employers. Another thing, I suppose, AI is in the workplace is also being used in kind of scheduling of tasks and things like that, and increasingly things like employee surveillance. Seeing where people are, and it's kind of workplace surveillance tools, and that obviously comes with issues around kind of a lack of worker autonomy and maybe a little bit of kind of worker dehumanization, that you're reduced to a sort of a series of data points. And again, you've obviously got the kind of the trust issues that go along with that. And another thing I think we're seeing is that this kind of rapid deployment of AI, while the regulation is still catching up, that can lead to challenges around, protecting workers' rights and so on in the workplace. So they would be, I suppose, some of the ethical issues with relation to rolling AI out sort of widely within workplaces.
Mm. It's funny when you're saying about that autonomy kind of part of it. I was just thinking of an 8-year-old at home who said, he's like, she will do it. If you ask her to do something, she'll like, well, I won't do it now because you told me to do it, but I was going to do it. So it's like almost like that. If we start treating like human adults as like to be told what to do, our human nature might reject that.
Yeah. But I think all of those issues are, the answer to all of those issues is good management, right? Good, transparent, clear management, clear communication. I think we talk a lot about fair and accountable AI. We also need to be talking about fair and accountable management that's implementing these AI systems, because there's certainly a downstream effect there.
Management to leadership, maybe,
Exactly.
so that we will follow, but to be told it's kind of not necessarily, particularly in spaces like, learning spaces where people want to kind of learn kind of organically, as in opposed to being forced as such. But Anne, I might move on to, so Richie earlier mentioned 2024, is that where we are, being the year of implementation. And I suppose particularly in the university space, we need to think about implementation of AI skills, interestingly, in non-traditional computer science backgrounds, or, the wider across the university, where we want all graduates to be thinking about their digital literacy and capability. Maybe can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, certainly. From even just a HR, I can tell you about our HR program that we've designed in terms of, okay, you're a people manager and you're a people leader, but we've a full digital spine now required by CIPD, which is the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development. So they're our professional body accreditation, and they are insisting on HR professionals having that skill set right from the very beginning, in terms of just digital business, moving on to future of work, moving on to digitalization of HRM, all essential now for a HR graduate. So somebody who say, you normally get a student coming in going, why do you want to go into HR? Because I love people. Yeah, and you're going, all right, anything more? You need a little bit more depth to that, and those skills are seen as central. We actually have a HR analytics module that differentiates us from a number of other different programs as well, and that's hugely beneficial when they go out in placement. So I think those sort of pieces are essential for business graduates as much as technological graduates.
Okay, yes. Super. So, and that's interesting in the university space, and it'd be interesting, Cassiana, if you could speak a little bit in terms of an organisation like BT Source, to like what are you thinking in terms of implementation, or how does that look like in industry?
I think for us in BT Source, we are looking at different skill sets for our different roles in the organization. And I think generally everyone is just bringing everyone up to speed to a certain level on AI. And this is where our CEO is communicating this across the organization regularly. And I think what we're trying to do in trying to create that space, or call it that learning culture, where the CEO continuously communicates about the organizational objective and saying, this is what we want to become, a digital AI company. And whether you are in procurement or you are in support function, everyone has to have at least a baseline of those critical skills like your AI, data analytics, and also predictive analytics. So I think this is where, for me, in my role, this is where I'm continuously ensuring that all of our development programs aligns with the strategic goal of the business.
Okay. So then when we think about, like, lots of companies thinking, okay, we need to move forward, just implement. Peter, then in terms of the pharma industry, you spoke to it being a bit risk averse.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll be an issue then for pharmaceutical companies or how they do business?
Yeah, I mean, well, the pharma industry, obviously, it's quite large, and I'll kind of break this up because it depends on what part. So let's say in the really early stage, the discovery phase, they've been talking about AI for drug discovery for quite a while, and there is going to be massive breakthroughs in that area because you're very, very far away from the patient at that point. There's going to be years of safety stage gates before you get to anything going into a person. So it's to get the best possible molecules that we can, and potentially minimize the amount of I suppose misfires in terms of all of the ones that don't work out. There's going to be massive I suppose efficiencies on that side. My background is in manufacturing, so it's far closer to the patient, and the appetite for risk is significantly lower. But at the same time, there are very, I suppose, targeted areas that they have been using AI for a while. It wasn't just the last 2 years with the ChatGPT hype in the areas of vision systems for, let's say, all of your vials, like you were saying, for the COVID vaccine and everything that went into that, and the making sure that your false rejects are as low as possible, bring down the cost and improving overall quality. And then there's other areas around, like whenever there's an issue, called a deviation in pharma speak, you have to write up really significant reports around it. These can be tens to like even maybe up to 100 pages of what happened, what should have happened, and everything that you did to fix it. So there's massive amounts of very strong logical data that can be pulled in. Let's say if there's a new thing that happens, suddenly you have, across a large company, thousands and tens of thousands of documents that you can pull from with a large language model, and that'll be a really exciting industry to see, or exciting area to see how in knowledge management you can basically get the right knowledge to the right person at the right time through the use of AI. So, but it's still they still have to have some sort of risk control around it. Whatever's being produced, they need to have an understanding of the potential for hallucinations, as was said earlier, and the level of rigor of a person coming in. What do they have to do to basically validate and do due diligence on this information? But yeah, it's exciting times in pharma as well.
Yeah. No, we're all adapting. So, look, before we open it up to the audience, I might just I'll ask Cassiana, and if anybody else wants to add to it, I'm going to ask if you have any, say I'm anybody in this room thinking about how or what could I do, tips, skills, anything of how do you learn, how do you get better at AI, how do you inform yourself to future-proof your careers? Any ideas?
So for me, as a learning and development professional, what I do continuously is to do a lot of reading, research, attend conferences, events like this. In the last couple of months, I've been attending a few conferences and been in these events, asking questions, and also I've also asked someone to mentor me because this is an area I think I need, especially I need to develop my skill set in. And I think I'm continuously doing what I call more horizon scanning, seeing what's happening in the operating environment, what's happening internally in the organization, and how I can adapt. So, yeah, those are a few tips I would give.
Anybody else? Any tips?
Just generally get stuck in. People start using the tools that are out there. There's lots of AI tools. Don't have a fear about them. You know, you're talking about an 8-year-old. They will dive into using ChatGPT, DALL-E. You know, we're just going to have to get much more comfortable with these tools. They are going to start permeating our workplace. So sort of, you know, release the fear and just get involved. And I think just start using the tools more. And you'll see that they actually, you know, you can bring them into your daily work much easier than you might think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it is about embracing it, certainly. But with your earlier point, with a very clear ethical reasoning around your use of it. Because like you said, there's a lot of kind of under the covers or in the corner of the office, you know, use of it. Kind of, I didn't write that, or AI wrote that, you know, and it's been used all over in HR. You know, nobody has ever now started with a blank page when you're writing job descriptions. You know, it's just like, here we go. And you have it, you know. So it allows for a higher level of use of your human brain cells. So I think if we use it at that basis, embrace it, but be very clear on the ethical considerations around it.
Peter?
And I'll be very pharma on this side. I completely agree with those. But one thing I would kind of add is an understanding of the risk of what you're doing, whatever is being produced, and understanding the limitations of the whatever models or tools that you're using, and see how, like, what's the worst case scenario here. Like in a pharma setting, it can be catastrophic. So obviously you need to have really, really strong controls. So just play around with it, but within reason for whatever you're using it for.
Okay. And then I suppose I just sometimes think, like, if we go back to thinking about the long process that I went through to write a thesis and all this time that we've saved, I'm just wondering, what do we do with all this extra time that we've saved? These are great questions that we were all asking ourselves within academia as well. And I think what's interesting might be about back to how you design, like the learning process might be even more important than the content that people are coming and communing together to learn, because the skill sets might be in that problem-based learning and kind of community and team working and problem solving together will be possibly more important than the content, because the content's going to be there at the touch of a button. So it is interesting. We are thinking about that as well in terms of what's this space for if we could sit at home and, you know, dial in remotely to the library and get access or do whatever. These spaces are going to be different. And if we think back to my scenario of when you think about all the skill sets of, I had to catch a bus, I had to, you know, engage with a bus driver, I had to go to the library, a social space where I'd bump into people. There was different skill sets, you know, timing and time management that I was acquiring in that whole archaic process 2 decades ago. So there'd be, you know, that's that wider skill sets that we need to look at as educators. But maybe if anybody wants to kind of add to that idea of, you know, what are we all doing this for?
Yeah, and I mean, that's an old kind of scenario, you know, where we're kind of saying, God, is the degree dead? And there's the whole scenario around skills first and how we are developing graduates with attributes rather than maybe around content. So we have a set of, say, TU Dublin graduate attributes that all of our graduates will attain through their degree, and the transversal element of that. So the skills that they're gaining, like you mentioned, through their degree. And again, TU Dublin, to put a little plug in, are probably closer to industry than most and more skills-based and practice-based than traditional universities. And I think that's where our edge is actually what the techie guys would say. They can hit the ground running. So our graduates can adapt, they're flexible. Yes, they have knowledge that maybe, is outdated, but they have the ability to be able to continue to learn and keep themselves open to learning and lifelong learning. So that's something that we encourage all the time in their skill development.
Thank you. Hi. I just wanted to follow up on that point about skills, because my understanding has always been and remains that education is learning about and training is learning to. So, which is the clear differentiation between education and skills attainment. The question, therefore, is if we, as trainers and learning and development specialists, are giving people skills which will inevitably in a year be obsolete, and we teach them the next set of skills. Surely the role of educators and universities is to give people the learn about, so they can do the critical thinking, they can be the expert, they can look at the job description and say, this is bullshit, as opposed to being the person that's just putting in the prompt into the system.
Absolutely.
Because that's the skill.
Yeah. And key of the transversal skills is those problem-solving skills and critical evaluation. Okay, not just the softer, maybe lighter ones I referred to earlier as well. And I think your differentiation between, say, education and training is one. Again, I think we're getting closer, and in terms of our even the role of the Enterprise Academy in bringing industry and universities together on this journey together, I think it embraces that piece and embeds them a little bit more into each other's practices.
See, I think that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure that's a good thing.
Really?
Yeah. Because genuinely, as someone who spent 20 years in the learning and development space, where I'm teaching skills, I'm not doing education, I'm teaching skills. And whether that be the durable skills, the communication skills, assertiveness, presentation, blah, 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 or whether it be the perishable skills, teaching someone how to use a piece of software, it's still just skills. I'm not teaching them why psychologically communication is important. That's an educator's role.
And that's not absent either from our education role. I suppose we're taking on the additional element to bridge it, but maybe you could talk more about the bridging.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying, but I think from my perspective, there should be no divide between industry and education. And I think the partnership we've had now with Enterprise Academy is great, because internally, as a learning and development professional, I've been able to identify the critical skills gap within the organization, and partnering with the Enterprise Academy to bridge those gaps is fine. They are teaching people the skills to be able to bridge those gaps, but I think ultimately what these delegates are going to get from all of this is that learning agility, constantly looking at ways to adapt to changes that are happening, not just within the organization, but outside. I think coming here to get that critical thinking skill, that ability, I think that's critical for our people. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Anna.
As we wrap up this week's episode of the Future Talent podcast, our panelists have provided a wealth of insights into the intersection of AI and education. We've explored the evolving skill sets required in the age of AI, emphasising the importance of technical proficiency, adaptability, and the human touch in our increasingly automated world. This episode underscores the critical need for continuous learning, ethical considerations, and the integration of AI literacy in both educational and professional settings. I hope this episode was useful, and if you would like to chat with any of the team at the Enterprise Academy about future collaborations, do get in touch. You will find our contact details in the podcast show notes. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.